It's another week, and we got another database with no access control.
So Matt, building off the memcached issue, there's a new thing that came up with etcd, right? You have a story on that?
Yeah, so these not quite a database kind of databases like memcached or MongoDB, people are apparently exposing them to the internet without any concern for the actual security. etcd is kind of interesting. I did some research into it. It's like a distributed database specific to CoreOS, and earlier versions of this software have absolutely no access control. So if you were to go and make a request to the API endpoint for this thing, you could just ask it what's in the database and you get it. It's another example of what we keep finding is these new databases, new technologies that assume that if you're accessing it, you should have access, which fundamentally is a poor assumption. So apparently this researcher, Giovanni Calazzo, he did some research when he found out that this was the way that etcd is set up. He went and checked Shodan because that's the first thing you do. Hey, what's out there? And apparently Shodan has scanned for these, and he was able to find around 9,000 different records that were marked password, and then a smattering of them that were AWS tokens, and then other various credentials across all these different machines that he was scanning. Obviously, this is something that people, if you're managing CoreOS, etcd on any of your machines, you should definitely look into it and update to the latest version, which will add that support for access control.
If you haven't updated an etcd database and it's exposed, you're potentially in a bad spot here. So the issue is that the older version doesn't, because it doesn't even have any authentication, right?
Nothing. As long as you can hit that interface, that API interface, you'll get the data.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
I mean, I guess the idea is, is the function of these databases to have anything valuable, right?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there may be some specifically secure databases out there, but for most developers, they think, well, it's a database. I can put what I want in the database, I can get it back, and they won't give any consideration to, can anybody else get this data? Hopefully developers will be figuring out soon, if you're going to come up with something like this, build security in while you're developing it. Have your first version come out with access control, because I guarantee you someone's going to stick it on the internet without realizing what they've done.
It's the same thing we're seeing with these S3 buckets and these public clouds. It's, some level of security and thought has to go into using public-facing repositories.
Absolutely, sure. I think it seems like another one of these same old lesson, same old story, and yet every week there seems to be another one. So
yeah, I mean, this one seems a little different than that. etcd is a little bit more sort of developer-y. It's not, you doubt if somebody's corporate repository, it's probably more, skunkworks kind of stuff, right?
It's possible. I mean, from what I understand, CoreOS and Kubernetes are all part of this ecosystem. Right. So there are corporate uses for it, but I imagine I'm less familiar with it, so I would tend to think it's a newer technology. I might be wrong.
That was the thing when I saw this story, I said, I don't even know what this is. This was a new one to me.
Well, just think maybe a few years ago, a lot of folks were brand new to the idea of MongoDB too. Right. I mean, as new technologies come onto the scene, that's when people are paying attention to them. That's developers, and that's also criminals. Yeah. So
it's it does point out how valuable a tool Shodan is for finding stuff like this. They've scanned for this. They'll show you individual strings that you can grab. It's kind of like what we can, a glimmer of what we can show with internet weather, but really valuable insight into what's exposed.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I appreciate it definitely from an offender standpoint because it lets you see where the problems are so you can address them more quickly. Now, in a large corporation, you may have your own scanning efforts. You might have something that periodically scans, but to have Shodan, I don't want to say check your work, but also providing their own unique perspective that you may not quite get is also valuable.
The lesson here really is be careful about what tools you're selecting. If you are using the newest, earliest version, keep it sort of local and don't expose that out where anybody can get to it.
Some people will chase after the brand new shiny object, the new technology that someone promises will solve all of their problems. Just be aware that you may be introducing different problems from a security standpoint.